once you get into the second harmonic, sometimes it's hard to get back. Greetings, friends. Gemini Brett here. I'm trying to explore some of the fabric of the gene keys, or these like gates in the human design structure, which splits the zodiac instead of into 12 30-degree signs, splits the zodiac into 64 divisions, 64 equal divisions. So if you take the 360 degrees of the circle and divide by 2, you get 180, and divide into fourths and you get 90, divide into eighths, you get 45. That's the octile. Divide those eighths in half again, and you get 22 and a half degrees. That's like sixteenths of the circle. Divide those sixteenths in half to get 30 seconds of the circles, and now you're into like 11.25 degree sections. All right, what is that divided into half? Because that would be a 64th division, and the answer is like 5.625 degrees. So 64 divisions. Why? Now, if you study human design and say maybe take it further into the gene key space, you can see things about the I Ching and the King Wei sequence and the amazing kind of elemental medicine of the Bagua and other things that I'm just frankly kind of unstudied and somewhat ignorant about. My dear friend Elijah Parker, master of this stuff, somebody who I'm happy to be speaking with very shortly about, where the gene keys align to. And when we look at these 64 divisions of the zodiac in respect to the stars, what was happening when they came through, and what's happening with them now. Is this something that changes as a result of Earth's tertiary motion, right? Primary motion, the day; secondary motion, the year. And the tropical zodiac is aligned to the crossings of the plane of the day, which is the equator, and the plane of the year, which is the ecliptic, right? But the third motion of Earth, which is axial precession, brings the tropical signs, which are Earth's directions, through the stars over the great year of about 26,000 years. We often speak of that as the precession of the equinoxes, right? So if the gene keys are tropically aligned, then the gene keys as well will precess through the signs. And this conversation here is not about what are the gene keys aligned. Although I will say in our time, Regulus becomes a very interesting answer to that question, or let me just say like further question. But I just want to speak about 64ness in general and the elegance there, and actually how 64 and 12 in sacred number, and especially in sacred harmony, meet. So we're going to try to play some flute again. It was tricky there at the beginning. So I just want you to hear this. Okay, what just happened there is through some manipulation of my insides, the outside changed, and you heard the relationship between the first and the second harmonic. So what is that? Every tone, this is maybe the most amazing thing, a musical thing about tone, is every tone consists actually of many notes. Now you can actually synthesize like what they call a pure wave, which actually would defy that natural harmonic truth. Therefore, it's not pure at all. Okay, but anytime you hear something like this flute or this melodica, you're hearing many notes combining to create the tone that you are experiencing, right? And actually, the thing that differentiates this tone or timbre of the flute from this of the melodica, where were we? Or any other instrument, is the relative amplitude or volumes of the different tones that come together to create the sound that you hear in what we would call like a note, right? So, right, this flute has that particular timbre because of the relative volume, let's say, of the notes in its harmonic series. Now we're getting into the woods here, right? Into the bamboo. So I ask you maybe just to bear with me. It's easier to see this on a vibrating string, and I should have grabbed the monochord, which is on top of that bookcase. That's one of the instruments that it is said Pythagoras was using to first kind of crack this code and explore this thing. And that led to the advent of harmony, or the system of what we know as like Western harmony. And maybe I'll speak to that just a little bit, but I just want to be here. I want to show you an interesting thing. Okay, so I'm starting here. I'm really in the kind of hardest place to start in this flute, because my fingers feel not large enough, but at the bottom of the flute. So when I have all of these holes covered, then the air is traveling all the way through. It's vibrating this entire flute length, right? Well, watch what happens, and actually hear what happens when I start lifting fingers, right? And making this flute essentially shorter, right? Because when I have them all closed, it's vibrating the entire length. When I lift that up, now the air is coming out here. So I cut this length off of the vibrating column, right? Let's do that. There's a thumb hole as well, right? So when I'm playing none, or when I'm covering none of the holes, the air is coming through here at a length that is half of the entire flute length, right? So, or the length that's vibrating when all of the holes is covered is twice that of the length of this bamboo that's vibrating when none of these holes are covered. All right, and just listen to the relationship between all covered and none covered. Right? Now that relationship or interval we call the octave. Oct 8. Why is it called the octave? 8 tones. The 8th tone of that so-called diatonic or major scale, which you're all familiar with, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Why do we call the top note do and the bottom note do? Because they're the same note. I'm not sure what this flute is tuned to, but let's say this is a C down here. That'd be like C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. So that's just the next C above the place where we began. So we call it the octave because it's the 8th occ note in that scale. But in another level, we should really call it the second, the second harmonic, right? So what are harmonics? It's very natural. It's actually something that in nature produces a system of 12 completely naturally. Thing that I think astrologers should love about this, right? But this first of these relationships from a harmonic perspective is not this, the do re, it's the do do. Do do, somewhere, chestnuts, willow, there's a spaceman waiting in the sky. He wants to come and meet us, but he'd think he'd blow our mind, right? Like that octave jump which is the second harmonic, we're moving from a fundamental frequency, which is the lowest of the notes that are combining for you to hear this tone, and we're jumping to a vibration that's moving twice as quickly, okay? And that's what happens when you're vibrating half of the column, right? So when I have all of these holes covered and the entire length of this flute is vibrating, you're hearing a thing that's doing this. Oh, right? When I uncover all of these holes and half of this column is vibrating, right? You're hearing something that's moving twice as fast. So this is the octave relationship, 2 to 1. Or let's say the second harmonic relationship. And get the occ and the eight and the scale tones out of it. It's just this. The relationship of one thing moving twice as quickly as the other thing does. Right? If I sped that up incredibly fast, you would hear something like this. Because this note is vibrating twice as fast. Willow. Somewhere. So that jump, we're going from a vibration to the second harmonic, which is the vibration that's moving twice as quickly, okay? And the harmonic series shows us that every vibrating thing, like a string of a guitar or a piano, or the flute here, is vibrating actually at many frequencies simultaneously. So embedded in this tone is also this tone. Right? So again, I'm covering all the holes, we're vibrating the whole thing. I'm uncovering all of the holes, we're vibrating half the thing. And so we get that 2 to 1 relationship, and there's somewhere, right? Over the bamboo. But check this out. Now I'm going to uncover no holes at all and just work with the inner me to kind of cut the fundamental, the first harmonic, the root tone out of what you're hearing. Well, how can that happen? Because I'm not lifting a finger, right? And still we're hearing this jump as if I did lift all of them. Right? And the answer is that this tone and all tones, which is vibrating this entire flute length, consists also of not only that wave that's going the entire flute length, but of a wave that's moving twice as quickly, right? And splitting this thing in half. And a wave that's moving 3 times as quickly. And a wave that's moving 4 times. And 5 and 6, okay? And so the wave that's moving twice as fast as the fundamental wave, that's the second harmonic, and it sounds like this. All right. Well, the third harmonic is moving 3 times as quickly, and it sounds like this. That is the same sound that you would hear if a third of this column was covered. Now, I can't actually do that by lifting my fingers. I would need holes that go like all the way up into here. But I can cover 2/3 of this flute length, which is this, right? So this length here, covered with these 2 fingers, is 2/3 of the entire length. That's the relationship of what we call the musical fifth. Why do we call it the musical fifth? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? But the true third harmonic, which is a vibration 3 times as fast as the fundamental, isn't. It's twice this thing, okay? So this gets kind of tricky because the math magics comes onto the scene. All right. But basically, when we get into the second harmonic, we're vibrating twice as quickly, right? That's the octave. That's like all I can do by lifting fingers on this thing. When I get to the third harmonic, and again, I'm just kind of manipulating my insides to change what you're experiencing on the outside or the way that the fluid is vibrating so that you're hearing more of the third harmonic instead of the first or the second. So I would go from the first to the second to the third. Let me go to the fourth. I can't. But it's like it's the next octave, and it's not what I just sang either. Yikes, right? But the fourth harmonic, which is 4 equals 2 times 2, right? It's the same as the fundamental tone, but it's vibrating 4 times as fast or twice as fast as the fundamental or as the second harmonic. Let me show it to you here. Like this is the C, the one to the left of the 2, not left of the 3. And I'll just play C, C, and another C. So first harmonic, second, and we'll get to the fourth, right? Now, what's the eighth harmonic going to do? It's twice the fourth, the next octave up. What's the 16th going to do? The next octave up. What's the 32nd? The next octave up. What about 64? The next octave up, right? So 64, which is part of our exploration here, right? Because again, the gene keys or like the human design gates, they divide the circle, the zodiac, into 64 slices. In a sense, we're in the binary code, doubling. Mitosis. You were once a cell that became two, right? Interestingly, from two people, one cell, and then the one cell becomes two, and the two become four, and the four become eight, and the eight becomes 16, and the 16 becomes 32, and the 32 becomes 64. We're too familiar with these numbers these days because of computer memory, right? Are you going to splurge for the 512 or pay a little bit less for the 256 or even the 128, which is twice 64, 32, 16, 8, 4, 2, 1, right? So if we have something vibrating at like 1 hertz, which would be 1 beat per second, it wouldn't sound like a tone to you. It would sound like this, right? But if I double that, now we're getting somewhere. What if it's 4 times as fast? What if it's 8? I mean, at some point, I'm snapping so quickly and I can't that we're just hearing bzzz, right? So if we take this fundamental frequency of just 1 hertz, 1 cycle per second, or you could say 1 cycle per anything, the next tone within the harmonic series would be double that. So if we go from 1, we get to 2. All right. Now, not the next tone in the harmonic series, which is a third, right? But a fourth. Well, fourth is half of a half, right? So the half of the half or the quarter, we're going to get to the next octave. See what I'm saying? And so 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. I could keep going. And let's do that a little bit. 64, 128, 256, 512. Okay. Have you heard of the 432 hertz debate in music? That instead of tuning the note A to 440 hertz, so 440 buzzes per second, cycles per second, right? Like I'd have to snap 440 times per second, and we would hear this. Because almost all instruments out of the factory are tuned these days to A equals 440 hertz. And the debate is that 432 hertz is a much more natural number. Well, what I want to share here with you is that 432 and 64 are intimately related. All right, so we're seeing here, like from Terrarian Librarian, that her husband and daughter tune their guitars to 432. All right, I'll say an issue there is that the way that we tune music in general these days, so this is called temperament. We've created what's called the equal temperament system, which takes the octave, or the space between the first and the second harmonic, and divides it into 12 equal divisions, like taking the zodiac circle and dividing it into 12 equal signs. It's not how music naturally works. So regardless of what you tune your A to, once you get to D, you're not going to be within this set of frequencies that kind of resonate to the 432 hertz debate. And that's a long tail. The other issue is when folks tune their A to 432, I can no longer play in tune with them on a fixed string, or in this case, a fixed reed instrument that was tuned factory to 440, right? Well, I'm a saxophone player. Like I have to like really kind of manipulate things in here, and change the tube length by pulling my mouthpiece in or out, in this case out, to like lower the pitch. But the instrument was designed to resonate with the set of equal temperament frequencies around 440 hertz, right? So simply tuning a guitar to 432 in a sense doesn't really do it. You would have to tune each of the pitches individually, and you can't do that on a guitar because you have 6 strings to play, not infinite, but many, many, many pitches. So just an interesting thing to consider. And for those who want to take that deeper, you need to study things like equal temperament versus Pythagorean tuning and other systems of temperament and tuning. And I think I should leave that there. But speaking of Pythagoras, and this is going to bring the 64 and the 12 in a way together. The most consonant, settled, and frankly beautiful relationship between two notes is the octave, the first and the second harmonic, right? Because we're taking the most simple whole number division of the wave, right? And taking the one wave and dividing into 2. Right? So this, and again, if I sped that up, you would hear something like this. I mean, listen to how much more settled this is than this. Right? There's places we can go that are very settled, and places that are definitely not. Now, it's not good and bad, but it's consonant and dissonant. And the consonance is the result of simple whole number divisions of the wave to create another tone that has a consonant relationship with the first. Okay, so the most consonant is just taking our wave and dividing it in half. So we have really doubling the frequency of the wave. It's moving twice as fast. But like on a piano or a guitar, you're playing a string that's half as long, just as here we're vibrating half of the column. Right? The next most consonant relationship is what we call the musical fifth. Twinkle, twinkle, we love the stars. Feel how settled that is in your body. And this one, an all fixed strings instrument, because of this equal temperament thing I described before, which helps us be able to play in all of the keys on one instrument like this keyboard. It actually, this relationship you're hearing, it's not perfectly the relationship between the fundamental frequency and one that's vibrating 3 times as quickly. It's very close, but in equal temperament, things like this musical third, it's actually not that close to the natural frequency of the vibration that's moving 5 times as fast, or in that case 4/5. And again, getting into the woods, if you will. Okay, well, let me just play these first 3 harmonics again. Right, that note you're hearing is a third of the flute, which again I can't produce by uncovering holes alone. I have to do something in my insides to change the outsides. But the third harmonic of this fundamental tone is the same as the second harmonic, or the octave, of this one. And you can hear a slight difference there, okay? But I can play that tone, which is like, let's say, the parent of, again, that's spaceman. I can't sing that high. Somewhere over, right? That's the octave thing. So we can do a thing where we take the harmonic series, which very quickly gets like so high, it's like above the ability of the human ear to hear. And we, in a sense, can like tame those super high frequencies by bringing them down through their octave jumps, right? So I can take this sound that's 1/3 of the vibrating column of all the holes closed, and then I can bring that into the octave, the spaces between the fundamental and the second harmonic, which vibrates twice as fast, by just bringing it down an octave, right? So let's say this thing's buzzing at 100, and it's not. But let's say this is 100, then this is 200, then this is 300. Wait. Sorry. Okay, well, 300 is not within the span of 100 and 200. But 150 is. You see, so if I take the 300 and I bring it down the octave jump, then I bring it within the range of my first harmonic or fundamental or root tone and the second harmonic. Right? So I'm going to bring this thing down to, and now I can get there. Twinkle, twinkle. And that, right, 1 to 3 relationship, or in this case, 1 to 2/3 relationship, that's the next most consonant thing from the 1 to 2, right? 1 to 2, quite simple. We can all do that. If we have 3 and 2, that's the next most settled polyrhythm, 3 against 2, right? It's the next most simple relationship to 2 and 1, right? If I was able to speed that thing you're hearing, this one's playing 3 in the same space that that's doing 2. If I could speed that up, you would hear something like this. This note is vibrating 3 halves as fast as the lower note you hear. So the whole Pythagorean thing, it's based upon that 3 to 2 relationship, which it's weird, but it creates the musical fifth. Because all notes of that scale, and in fact, all notes of the 12 notes or divisions of the circle between, they all are produced naturally through this harmonic series. So even in other musical systems like in India, where you really can't play Indian music on a fixed string like instrument like this because you need notes in between these notes. They also honor the 12 because the 12 literally is produced through nature. Okay, but what we're going to do here is we're going to move, as Pythagoras did, up fifths. I ran out of notes. I have one more. And then this keyboard's just not long enough. Okay? I need 7 octaves worth of space for me to get to all 12 tones that are found in what we call this chromatic scale. Again, the way I get to this one is actually I'm going to the third harmonic here, but I'm playing the kind of parent of that child. So now that's within my first and second harmonic relationship within that span of an octave. Or now we get 12 chromatic divisions, the signs. We get 7 diatonic divisions, the planetus, the 7. But 7 and 12 come into it in a different way. And check this out. 1. You're going to have to look at me counting on my fingers as I speak. 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. Okay, so if I had a fundamental tone at 1 and I double that and I quadruple that and then I make that into 8 and 16 and 32 and 64, I'm doing this octave relationship, right? Or the first harmonic to the second, to the fourth harmonic, to the 8th harmonic, to the 16th harmonic, to the 32nd, to the 64th harmonic. And it's covering 7 octaves of music, of on a keyboard. I would need 7 C's or D's or G's or A's or whatever to get from the bottom all the way to the top. Now, an amazing thing is when you do this through what we call the circle of fifths, you need that 7 octaves of space to get back to the fundamental tone where you began. So that is C, G. The fifth of G is D. The fifth of D is A. The fifth of A is E, B, F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp. And then depending on what we want to call that, you start getting into flats. But anyway, you have to go up a fifth, up a fifth, up a fifth, up a fifth 12 times to get back to the note where you began. So if you start at C, 12 of those get you back to a C, and that 12 notes is found in the 7 octaves of space. I really need to be sitting at a piano, which could show you this because the 88 keys of the piano offer enough room and a little bit more for you to go 7 octaves and go through what we call the circle of fifths, right? So let me just do one more thing with you. The circle of fifths, I'm taking a fundamental frequency and I'm taking that frequency and I'm playing 2/3 of the thing, right? And why the flute's great to demonstrate that is you can actually see it, that this length is 2/3 of this. You can see that on a guitar string super well, maybe even better, all right? I can't go further than that because I'm already having to go high into the harmonic series to even demonstrate that on a kind of simple instrument like this. Well, what if we want to find the musical fifth, which is this third harmonic relationship of a frequency that's buzzing at 64 hertz, 64 cycles per second. You simply take that 64 and you multiply by 3 and you divide by 2 and you get 96. Okay. And by the way, so if let's say C is 64, that would mean that the fifth of C, which is G, would be at 96 hertz. Okay. Well, what about the fifth of that G? We take that 96, we multiply by 3, divide by 2, and you get 144, which astrologers should love, because that's 12 and 12. Anyway, from C at 64 to G at 96 to D at 144, we can multiply. What's 144 times 3 divided by 2?
144 times 3 divided by 2
216. Okay, so we went from C at 64 to G at 96 to D at 144, and the fifth of D is A at 216. Well, what's the octave of 216? 432. Okay, so if you're saying that your A is 432, you're really saying that your C is 1. Okay, because the 432, let's just drop it down an octave, 216. And if the A is 216, the D is 144, the G is 96, the C is 64. And if C is 64, the C above is twice that, 128. Right? Did I go the right way with that? Yeah. But the C beneath that is 32. The C beneath that, 16. The C beneath that, 8. The C beneath that, 4. The C beneath that, 2. We're just having the C beneath that, 1. So the argument of A equals 432 is actually an argument of C equals 1. Now, that's going to sound like a snap or a beat, not a buzz. Right? But if I get to twice that and 4 times that and 8 times, like eventually it's just going to be a tone. It's not going to be this tone because this thing's keyed to A equals 440 and its equal temperament and all sorts of other issues. But I just want to share with you the argument that A equals 432 really is the argument that C equals 1. And there's something profound about that. And this, that the 64, so the keys, are in the binary sequence, the doubling, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. And it's the 7th octave of 1. 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. And you need 7 octaves of space to move through the circle of fifths, the Pythagorean harmony, to get back to the note where you began. But it's going to be vibrating 7 times as quickly. Once you get there, you've touched all 12 notes in the chromatic scale. Creation creates in 12s, but you require 7 octaves to do that, from the 1 vibration to 64 times as fast. If you follow that, I bow to your patience. That's a lot to be with, but this is kind of what I've been contemplating in preparation for my conversation with my dear friend Elijah Parker about the gene keys and the stars. I wanted to share this with him, but why not share it with you too? See you in space, friends.